I didn't fall in love with Joel the day he saved me. I fell in love with him 3 weeks later, in a hospital cafeteria that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, when he sat across from me and said, "You don't have to pretend you're okay with me." That was the first time someone said that and actually meant it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 months ago, my life collapsed in the most boring, ordinary way possible. No dramatic car crash. No viral scandal. Just one bad phone call stacked on top of another until I couldn't breathe anymore. I lost my job on a Tuesday morning. Budget restructuring, my manager said, not looking at me. I nodded like I understood corporate language, packed my desk into a box, and walked out pretending I was fine. I wasn't fine. That same week, my boyfriend of 2 years told me he needed space, which is code for, I already met someone else. I found that out later through Instagram, like a normal modern adult. And then my mom got sick. That was the one that broke me. It wasn't sudden. She'd been tired for months. Ignoring it. We all were. Until one night she fainted in the kitchen and my neighbor called me instead of an ambulance because apparently I'm still the responsible one. I drove over like my life depended on it. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I remember thinking, this can't be happening. Not now. Not everything at once. That's when I met Joel. He was the paramedic who showed up with the ambulance. I didn't notice him at first. I noticed my mom. Pale. Scared. Trying to joke about just skipping lunch. I noticed the smell of something burnt on the stove. I noticed my own heartbeat in my ears. Joel was calm. That's the first thing I remember clearly about him. Calm in a way that didn't feel robotic. Not cold. Just steady. He crouched beside my mom, asked her simple questions, explained things in a voice that didn't rush. His partner moved around the room efficiently, but Joel stayed grounded. And when my mom was loaded into the ambulance and I was standing there feeling like a kid who'd lost something important, Joel looked at me and said, "You riding with us?" I nodded. My voice didn't work. Inside the ambulance, I sat on that little fold-down seat, staring at the metal cabinets like they held answers. Joel was across from me, checking monitors, adjusting something near my mom's arm. At one point, the siren cut off, and everything got quieter. That's when I realized I was shaking. Not dramatic sobbing, just shaking. Joel noticed. He didn't make a big deal about it. He just reached over, squeezed my shoulder once, firm and grounding, and said, "She's stable right now. We're getting her where she needs to be." That's it. But the way he said it, it felt like a rope thrown into deep water. At the hospital, everything blurred. Tests, forms, questions I didn't know how to answer because I hadn't been paying enough attention to how tired she was lately. I kept thinking I should have noticed more. Around 3 a.m., I was sitting alone in the waiting area when Joel walked past. I didn't expect him to stop, but he did. "You're still here," he said, not judgmental, just observant. "Yeah," I replied, staring at the vending machine like it was fascinating. He hesitated for a second. "She's in good hands. The ER doc is solid." I nodded. Then, without planning to, I said, "I lost my job this morning." I don't know why I told him that. Maybe because he was the only steady thing in the room. Joel didn't look surprised or uncomfortable. He leaned back against the wall, crossed his arms loosely, and asked, "That's a hell of a day." That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "Yeah," I said. "Hell of a day." He studied me for a second, like he was deciding something. "You eaten?" I blinked. "What? Have you eaten today?" I had no idea. "Maybe. Coffee." I shrugged. He pushed off the wall. "Come on." I followed him like I didn't have a choice. We ended up in the hospital cafeteria, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He bought 2 coffees and something that might have been a sandwich. We sat across from each other at a small plastic table. That's when I finally really looked at him. Dark hair, slightly messy like he'd run his hand through it too many times. Strong jaw, tired eyes. He looked older than me, maybe early 30s. Solid build under the Navy uniform. Not bulky, just sturdy. Safe. He caught me staring. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. He gave a half smile. "You don't have to be." And that did something to me. Because everyone else that week had either told me, "You'll bounce back," or "Stay positive," or "Everything happens for a reason." Joel didn't try to fix it. He just sat there. I ended up talking more than I meant to. About the job. About Bryce, my ex. About how stupid I felt for not seeing any of it coming. Bryce said I've been distant. I muttered, picking at the wrapper. Like I'm emotionally unavailable or something. Joel's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. You're here at 3 in the morning for your mom. Yeah, that doesn't sound unavailable. I looked up at him then. Really looked. There was no flirting in his tone. No agenda. Just simple logic. And that was the first time in days I felt seen. We didn't exchange numbers that night. He had to go. I had to go back upstairs. Before he left, he paused by the cafeteria door. She's going to need you steady, he said. Which means you need to sleep at some point. I don't think I can, I admitted. He studied me one last time. You can. You're stronger than you think. Then he walked away. I told myself I'd probably never see him again. I was wrong. 2 days later, I ran into him in the hallway outside my mom's room. And that's when everything really started. When I saw Joel again, I almost pretended I didn't. Not because I didn't want to see him. Because I did. Too much. I was standing outside my mom's hospital room arguing quietly with Bryce on the phone. Yeah, we were technically broken up. But apparently that didn't stop him from checking in just enough to make sure I stayed confused. I just think you shut down, Bryce was saying. Even now, you sound somewhere else. I'm at a hospital, I snapped, then immediately lowered my voice. My mom's in a hospital. I know. I'm just saying, this is what I mean. You disappear when things get hard. That one hit. Because part of me was scared he was right. I rubbed my forehead. I can't do this right now. You never can, he muttered. And that's when I looked up and saw Joel walking down the hall. He wasn't looking at me yet. He was talking to a nurse, nodding, focused. He had that same steady posture, like the chaos of the hospital didn't touch him. I felt stupidly relieved just seeing him. Bryce was still talking in my ear. Are you even listening? No, I said honestly. I'm not. And I hung up. Joel glanced over at the sound of my voice. Our eyes met, and I swear something in his expression shifted. Recognition, then something softer. Hey, he said, walking over. How's she doing? Still here, I replied. Which I guess is good. It is, he said. They run tests. More this morning. He nodded, then glanced at my phone still in my hand. Everything okay? I hesitated. Joel didn't push. He just waited. And for some reason, that patience made it harder to lie. I said finally. We're complicated. Joel's jaw tightened just slightly. Yeah. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to decide how much he was allowed to care. You don't look complicated, he said. You look exhausted. I laughed quietly. That too. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just full. I'm off shift in 20, he said. There's a coffee place across the street that doesn't taste like regret. If you need air. My heart did something weird in my chest. This wasn't a date. It couldn't be. I was a mess. He was working. My mom was sick. But the way he said it wasn't casual either. It was an invitation. I shouldn't, I said automatically. Probably not, he agreed. That made me smile. But you're going to burn out if you don't step outside for 30 minutes, he added. He wasn't wrong. Okay, I said before I could overthink it. 30 minutes. The coffee place was small, warm, nothing like the hospital. I didn't realize how tense I was until I stepped outside and felt real air. Joel changed out of his uniform jacket, now in a dark t-shirt that stretched across his chest in a way that made it very difficult not to look. I looked anyway. He caught me. Didn't call me out on it. Just gave that half smile again. We ordered. Sat by the window. And for the first time since everything started falling apart, I wasn't thinking about worst-case scenarios. What do you do? He asked. I corrected. Marketing. Tech company. He repeated. You'll find something else. You don't know that. He shrugged. Maybe not. But you don't seem like someone who just stops. I studied him. You don't know me. Not yet. The words landed between us heavier than they should have. I swallowed. So why paramedic? I asked, changing the subject before my brain short-circuited. He leaned back slightly. I like showing up when it matters. That answer shouldn't have hit as hard as it did. I don't always feel like I show up, I admitted quietly. He tilted his head. For who? Anyone. Your mom would disagree. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I felt like I'd been barely holding everything together for years. Job, relationship, expectations. I was good at functioning. Not so good at asking for help. Joel tapped his fingers lightly against his cup. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why'd you hang up? I blinked. What? The call. In the hallway. I stared at my coffee. Because I was tired of defending myself. For what? For not being enough. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Joel's expression shifted. Not pity. Something firmer. You don't look like someone who's not enough, he said. I laughed quietly. You don't even know me. Then tell me. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't invasive. It was direct. And it scared me a little. Because Bryce had known me for 2 years and still thought I was distant. Joel had known me for what? A few hours total? And he was asking me to open up like it was the most natural thing in the world. I get quiet when things hurt. I admit it. I process alone. Bryce hated that. He said it felt like I was shutting him out. Joel nodded slowly. Maybe you just hadn't met someone who could sit in the quiet with you. My chest tightened. The way he said it. Like he wasn't talking about Bryce anymore. Like he was offering something else. We held eye contact a second too long. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed softly. They need me back. Reality crashing in again. Of course they do, I said, trying to keep my voice light. He stood. I stood. For a second, we just looked at each other on the sidewalk. I'm glad I ran into you, he said. Me too. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Give me your number. My pulse jumped. This wasn't subtle anymore. I gave it to him. He typed it in, then looked back up. If you need anything. Or if you just need to get out of your own head. You don't even know what you're signing up for, I warned. He stepped closer, not touching, just inside my space. I have a pretty good idea, he said quietly. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't fear. It was fragile, but it was hope. That night, Bryce texted me. Are you seeing someone already? I stared at the message. Then I thought about Joel's steady voice. The way he looked at me like I wasn't broken. The way he didn't try to rush me. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new message. To Joel. Thanks for the coffee. And for showing up. He responded almost immediately. Anytime, Bryce. I frowned at the screen. Bryce? 3 dots. Then, sorry. Bryce is the ex, right? I froze. How did he? Then it hit me. In the cafeteria. That first night. I'd said Bryce's name. He remembered. My heart did that stupid, dangerous thing again. Yeah, I typed. Bryce is the ex. There was a pause. Then, good. I stared at that single word way too long. Because I had a feeling Joel wasn't just being polite anymore. And neither was I. The first time Joel came over, I almost canceled. My apartment was a mess. Not dirty, just neglected. Dishes in the sink. Laundry half folded on the couch. The kind of chaos that happens when your life quietly implodes and you stop caring about small things. He texted around 7 p.m. How's your mom? Stable, I replied. More tests tomorrow. 3 dots appeared. You eaten? I stared at that question. Define eaten. His reply came fast. I'm 5 minutes away. Don't argue. My heart slammed against my ribs. 5 minutes away? I hadn't given him my address. Then I remembered I had. When he'd driven me home from the hospital the night before, because I was too exhausted to function and apparently too stubborn to admit it. I stood up too fast and nearly tripped over my own sneakers. Why was I nervous? It was just Joel. Calm, steady Joel. That was exactly the problem. The doorbell rang. I opened the door and there he was, holding a brown paper bag and looking unfairly solid in a plain black hoodie. You look like you haven't slept, he said immediately. Hello to you too. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, kicked the door shut behind him gently with his foot, and handed me the bag. Ty, he said, because hospital cafeteria food is a crime. I blinked at him. You didn't have to. I know. That was becoming a pattern. He glanced around the apartment. Not judgmental. Just taking it in. Bad week, he said simply. Yeah. He set the food down and started opening containers like he'd been here 100 times before. It should have felt invasive. It didn't. We sat on the floor by the coffee table because I hadn't cleared the couch. He didn't comment. We ate mostly in silence at first. And I realized something. I wasn't performing. With Bryce, even in quiet moments, I always felt like I needed to be something. Engaging. Attentive. Emotionally expressive on demand. With Joel, I could just breathe. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me and said, Talk. I frowned. About what? Whatever's sitting in your chest. That directness again. I stared at my noodles. I'm scared. He didn't interrupt. I keep thinking, what if this is worse than they're saying? What if I can't afford whatever comes next? I don't have a job. I don't even know who I am without all the things I lost this week. There it was. The ugly, spiraling truth. Joel leaned back against the couch, studying me. Okay, he said. Okay. I repeated. Yeah, that's honest. Fear makes sense. I let out a frustrated breath. You're supposed to say it'll be fine. No, he said calmly. I'm not. I looked up at him. He held my gaze steadily. I don't know if it'll be fine, he continued. But I know you won't handle it alone. Something inside me cracked a little. Why? I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. Because I won't let you. The air shifted. There was nothing dramatic about the way he said it. No grand gesture. Just fact. I swallowed hard. You barely know me, I whispered. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. I know you show up. I know you don't run. I know you blame yourself for things that aren't yours to carry. That's enough. My throat tightened. Bryce used to say I was emotionally distant. Joel saw me in 3 days. I looked away first. Because if I didn't, I was going to do something reckless. Like kiss him. The thought hit me so suddenly I almost flinched. Joel noticed. What? He asked softly. Nothing. He shifted closer. Not touching. Just closer. Bryce still in your head? He asked. The jealousy wasn't sharp. It was controlled. Sometimes, I admitted. Not because I want him back. Just because. I keep wondering if he was right about me. Joel's jaw tightened slightly. About what? About me being hard to love. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything else we'd said. Joel stood up abruptly. For a split second, panic shot through me. Was he leaving? Instead, he walked around the coffee table and sat down beside me. Close. Close enough that our knees brushed. You're not hard to love, he said quietly. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't defensive. It sounded like something he'd decided a while ago. I couldn't breathe properly. You don't get to let someone who walked away define that, he added. His hand moved before I could process it. Not to grab. Not to claim. Just resting lightly on my forearm. Warm. Grounding. My pulse jumped. He noticed. Of course he did. Tell me to move, he said softly. I didn't. Instead, I looked at his hand. Then at his face. His eyes weren't demanding. They were asking. This wasn't like Bryce. Bryce used to kiss me in the middle of arguments. Used to escalate everything. Joel was giving me space inside the closeness. I don't want you to move, I admitted. That changed something. His thumb brushed slightly against my skin. Slow. Careful. My breath hitched before I could stop it. Okay, he said. We sat there like that for a long time. Not rushing. Not pretending. Just the quiet hum of my apartment and the weight of everything unsaid between us. I turned my hand slightly, enough that our fingers almost laced. Joel's jaw flexed. You sure? He asked. I nodded. And when he finally kissed me, it wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. It was slow. Like he'd been waiting for permission his whole life. His lips were warm. Steady. Intentional. I felt it everywhere. Not just in my mouth. In my chest. My stomach. My bones. When he pulled back slightly, his forehead rested against mine. You don't get to disappear on me, he said quietly. I let out a shaky breath. I don't want to. That was the truth. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I didn't want to retreat. I didn't want to shut down. I wanted to stay. With him. But as my phone buzzed on the table beside us, reality crashed back in. Bryce. Again. Joel's eyes flicked toward the screen. He didn't say anything. But something dark passed through his expression. And I realized something else. Falling for the man who helped me survive my worst week? That was the easy part. Letting go of the past completely? That was going to be harder. I didn't answer Bryce's call. But I didn't silence it either. I just let it buzz out on the table between us, like a reminder that my life hadn't magically simplified just because Joel kissed me. Joel pulled back slightly, eyes flicking to the screen, then back to me. He didn't ask who it was. He already knew. You don't owe him access to you, he said quietly. It's not about owing, I muttered. It's just unfinished. Joel leaned back a little, giving me space again. I could feel the shift. He wasn't retreating, but he wasn't pushing forward either. Then finish it, he said. It sounded simple. Clean. But nothing about Bryce and I had ever been clean. I grabbed my phone and stepped onto the balcony. The night air hit my face, cool and grounding. I called him back. He picked up on the first ring. So you are alive, Bryce said. I've been at the hospital, I replied, already tired of this. I know. He sighed. You've been distant all week. I closed my eyes. I lost my job. My mom's sick. We broke up. How present do you want me to be? That's not what I meant. It kind of is. Silence stretched between us. Then he asked it. Are you seeing someone? There it was. I looked through the glass door into my apartment. Joel was still sitting on the floor, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing in particular. Waiting. Not eavesdropping. Just there. I met someone. I said carefully. Bryce exhaled sharply. Already. It's not like that. Then what is it? I hesitated. What was it? A lifeline? A rebound? A mistake? The most stable I'd felt in months? It's someone who shows up, I said finally. Bryce went quiet. That's not fair, he said. No, I replied softly. It is. He didn't argue after that. We talked a few more minutes logistics, closure, the kind of forced maturity people try to have when something's already over. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter, not because I'd chosen Joel, because I'd chosen myself. When I stepped back inside, Joel looked up. He didn't ask. I walked over and sat down in front of him. It's done, I said. His eyes searched mine. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah. That was when he let himself move closer again. You don't look wrecked, he observed. I'm not, I admitted. I think I held on to it because I was scared to be alone. Joel's jaw tightened slightly at that. You're not alone, he said. The way he said it made something steady settle in my chest. I know, I replied. And I meant it. He reached up, brushed his thumb lightly along my jaw, like he was checking something fragile. You sure this isn't just timing? He asked quietly. That surprised me. What do you mean? Worst week of your life. I show up. That can blur things. The fact that he even worried about that told me everything. You think I'd kiss someone I didn't want just because I'm stressed? I asked. He held my gaze. I think pain makes people grab onto the nearest solid thing. And you think you're just convenient? I think I don't want to be your life raft, he said. I want to be someone you choose when you're standing on your own. God, who talks like that? I reached for him first this time. Not dramatic. Just sliding my hand into his hoodie and pulling him slightly closer. I'm choosing you, I said. The air between us tightened again. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and kissed me. Deeper this time. Not rushed. Not desperate. But no longer hesitant. His hand moved to my waist, fingers pressing in just enough to remind me he was real. I could feel the strength in him. Not overpowering. Just steady. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine again. You don't get to vanish when this gets hard, he murmured. I won't. You say that now. I smiled faintly. Test me. Something flickered in his eyes at that. Not dominance. Challenge. But before anything could escalate further, my phone buzzed again. Not Bryce. The hospital. My stomach dropped. Joel saw it instantly. Answer it, he said. I did. It was the doctor. Test results were back. They needed to discuss treatment options. Treatment options. That word echoed in my head. Not discharge. Not observation. Treatment. My hand started shaking again, just like in the ambulance days ago. Joel stood up without a word and came to my side. I nodded through the call. Asked questions. Tried to sound like an adult who understood medical terminology. When I hung up, I stared at the wall. Well, Joel asked quietly. They found something, I whispered. It's early, but it's cancer. The word felt unreal in my mouth. Joel didn't react dramatically. He didn't say, it'll be fine. He just wrapped his arms around me. Firm. Secure. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I let myself fall apart. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just my face pressed into his chest, breathing in his scent, gripping the fabric of his hoodie like it was the only stable thing left. I don't know how to do this, I admitted against him. Yes, you do, he said softly. How? You show up. That again. Always that. He pulled back slightly, so I had to look at him. We take it one appointment at a time, he said. One conversation. One bill. One bad day. You don't sprint through this. You walk it. With you? I asked before I could stop myself. His expression didn't waver. With me. No hesitation. No conditions. Just presence. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't falling for the man who saved my mom. I was falling for the man who stayed after the sirens stopped. The first chemo appointment was harder than the diagnosis. Diagnosis was a word. Chemo was real. It was the sterile room with reclining chairs lined up by the windows. It was the four-pole. It was the quiet hum of machines that didn't care about anyone's feelings. My mom tried to make jokes. Guess I'll finally lose those last 5 pounds, she said while the nurse adjusted the line. I smiled because that's what sons do. Joel stood behind me, one hand resting lightly between my shoulder blades. Not possessive, not dramatic, just there. He'd taken the morning off without telling me until he showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. with coffee. You don't have to come, I'd told him. I know, he said. That was his thing. He never came because he had to. He came because he wanted to. Inside the clinic, he didn't hover. He introduced himself to my mom like they hadn't technically already met during the ambulance call. "Joel," he said, offering his hand. "I'm the guy who stole your son for coffee." My mom looked between us with that look moms have when they know more than they're saying. "Oh," she said slowly. "That Joel." I felt my ears burn. Joel just smiled. For hours, we sat there, sometimes talking, sometimes not. And that's when I saw a different side of him. At work, he was controlled, efficient. Here, he was softer. He refilled my mom's water before she asked, adjusted her blanket, made quiet small talk about random things, movies, the terrible hospital parking situation, anything to keep her from focusing on the drip in her arm. At one point, she fell asleep. I stepped out into the hallway because I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. Joel followed. "You good?" he asked. I nodded automatically. He didn't accept that. "Bryce," he said gently. That surprised me. "What?" "You go quiet when you're not good." "God." I leaned back against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor like a kid again. "I hate that she's scared," I admitted. "And I hate that I can't fix it." Joel crouched in front of me. "You're not supposed to fix it." "Then what am I supposed to do?" He looked at me like it was obvious. "Be her son." That hit. Because somewhere along the way, I decided I had to be the provider, the planner, the emotional anchor. I forgot I was allowed to just be her kid. Joel reached forward and brushed his thumb along my wrist, grounding me. "You don't carry this alone," he said quietly. "Not on my watch." There was that line again. Not on my watch. It wasn't romantic. It was protective. And something inside me responded to that in a way that felt almost dangerous. I grabbed his hoodie lightly and pulled him closer. Not for a kiss, just so I could rest my forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around me without hesitation. And for a moment, I let myself feel small. Later that night, back at my apartment, everything felt too quiet. The adrenaline of the day had worn off. Joel was sitting at my kitchen counter scrolling through something on his phone while I stared at a stack of medical paperwork. "Insurance is going to be a nightmare," I muttered. "We'll figure it out," he said. I looked up. "You keep saying we." He met my eyes calmly. "That a problem?" "No, it wasn't. It was terrifying." "Joel," I said slowly, "you don't have to take this on." He set his phone down. "I'm not taking it on," he said. "I'm standing next to you while you handle it." That distinction mattered. He wasn't trying to replace me. He wasn't trying to rescue me. He was choosing to stand there. I walked over to him. "Why?" I asked quietly. He held my gaze. "Because I care about you." The words were simple, but they landed heavy. "How can you be so sure?" I pressed. He stepped closer. "I've seen people at their worst for a living," he said. "You didn't become smaller when things got hard. You became more honest." My chest tightened. "I'm a mess," I whispered. He reached up and cupped the side of my face gently. "No," he said. "You're human." And then he kissed me again. This one wasn't cautious. It wasn't testing. It was certain. His hand slid from my jaw to the back of my neck, fingers warm and firm. I stepped into him without thinking. My hands found his waist. There was tension there, real tension now. Not just emotional. Physical. Weeks of restraint layered under grief and fear and adrenaline. He pulled back slightly, breathing heavier. "You sure?" he asked again. "Always that." I nodded. He didn't rush me, but he didn't hold back either. His mouth moved slower, deeper, more intentional. His hands stayed respectful but present. Grounding. My back hit the counter lightly. He paused instantly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I breathed. "Don't stop." Something shifted in his eyes at that. Not dominance. Not ego. Just heat. His forehead pressed against mine for a second like he was steadying himself. Then he kissed me again. And this time, I kissed him back like I wasn't afraid anymore. Because somewhere between hospital hallways and late-night Thai food, I'd stopped seeing him as the man who showed up in a crisis. I started seeing him as the man I wanted there when the crisis was over. But real life doesn't pause for romance. 2 weeks later, bills started stacking up. And I realized something else. Love doesn't remove pressure. Sometimes it magnifies it. Because now I had something real to lose. The first time Joel and I fought, it wasn't about us. It was about money. Which somehow made it worse. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table for over an hour staring at a spreadsheet that made my chest feel tight. Hospital bills, insurance gaps, medication costs, my savings shrinking by the week. I'd picked up a few freelance gigs, but it wasn't enough yet. Not even close. Joel was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching me spiral. "You're clenching your jaw," he said. I'm fine. He didn't respond to that. He'd learned by now that I'm fine meant the exact opposite. I pushed my laptop away and dragged both hands down my face. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Stop saying that. I snapped. The silence that followed was immediate. Joel didn't flinch, but his posture changed. Not defensive. Still, I'm not doubting you, he said calmly. I'm reminding you. I don't need reminding. I shot back. I need solutions. He walked over and pulled out the chair across from me. Okay, let's talk solutions. I shook my head. No, you don't get it. Then explain it to me. And there it was, that steady patience again. The one that made it impossible to hide behind sarcasm. I stood up too fast, pacing the small kitchen. I lost my job. My mom has cancer. I'm barely covering rent. And now you're here every day acting like this is just something we walk through. His eyes narrowed slightly at that. It is something we walk through. You don't know that. He stood up slowly. I do. You can't promise that. I'm not promising outcomes, he said, voice firmer now. I'm promising I'm not going anywhere. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made me panic. Why? I demanded. Why are you so sure about me? He stepped closer. Because I am. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. The room felt smaller suddenly. You barely know what I'm like when I'm not in crisis, I said. What if I'm not this strong version of myself all the time? Joel's jaw flexed. Bryce again, he muttered. Don't make this about him. It already is. That stung. I crossed my arms. You don't get to psychoanalyze me. And you don't get to push me away because you're scared. The words hit like a slap. I froze. He took a breath, visibly reining himself in. I'm not your ex, he said more quietly. I'm not going to leave because things are messy. I didn't say you would. You're acting like it. I opened my mouth to argue and then realized he was right. I'd been bracing for abandonment since the moment things started getting real. Because if I expected it, it wouldn't hurt as much. Joel stepped into my space, but he didn't touch me. You think I'm here out of obligation? He asked. No. Pity. God, no. Then what? I swallowed. I think you're stronger than I am right now. His expression softened immediately. That's not how this works. That's how it feels. He finally reached for me, hands resting on my waist, steady and warm. You're allowed to lean, he said. It doesn't make you weak. I felt my throat tighten. I hate needing people. I know. That broke me a little. Bryce used to say I made him feel unnecessary. I admitted quietly. Like I didn't actually need him. Joel's hands tightened slightly. Do you feel unnecessary right now? He asked. I looked at him. Really looked. No. Good. His forehead pressed lightly against mine. I don't want you to need me because you're drowning, he said. I want you to want me because I'm here. I do, I whispered. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was trusting it. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, tension dissolving slowly. I'm scared I'm going to ruin this, I admitted. He pulled back just enough to look at me. Then stopped trying to predict it. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, he said. It's simple. Explain. He brushed his thumb along my hip lightly, grounding both of us. You tell me when you're overwhelmed, he said. You don't shut down. I don't try to fix what isn't mine to fix. We don't punish each other for being stressed. I let out a slow breath. That's reasonable. Yeah. I hesitated. And if I screw up? You apologize. And if you screw up? I apologize. A reluctant smile pulled at my mouth. That's it. That's it. It sounded almost boring. But maybe boring was exactly what I needed. I reached up and grabbed the front of his t-shirt, pulling him down into a kiss. Not desperate. Not frantic. Just certain. His hand slid around my back, firm and secure. When we broke apart, he rested his chin on top of my head. You don't get to decide I'm leaving before I actually do, he murmured. I nodded against his chest. Okay. And for the first time, I meant it without reservation. Because here's the truth. The worst period of my life didn't end overnight. There were still hospital days. Still bills. Still moments where I sat on the bathroom floor, trying not to break. But Joel stayed. Not dramatically. Not heroically. Just consistently. And somewhere in the middle of that consistency, I stopped falling. I started choosing. It wasn't some grand romantic moment that made me realize I loved Joel. There were no fireworks. No dramatic hospital hallway confessions. No rain-soaked declarations. It happened on a Tuesday night. 3 months after the ambulance. 3 months of chemo cycles. Insurance calls. Freelance work. Coffee at 6 a.m. fights. Apologies. Slow kisses in the kitchen. Quiet mornings tangled in sheets when neither of us wanted to talk about test results. My mom's hair had started falling out that week. She tried to laugh about it, but I saw her in the bathroom, staring at the mirror like she didn't recognize herself. That night, after I dropped her back at her apartment, I drove home feeling hollow. Joel was already there. He had a key now. Not because we'd had a big move-in conversation. Because one night I was too exhausted to get off the couch, and he'd said, "Give me a key." And I had. He was standing at the stove when I walked in. "You eat?" he asked without turning around. Yeah, I lied. He glanced over his shoulder. "No, you didn't." I dropped my keys on the counter and leaned back against the wall. "I don't know how to help her," I said quietly. "She won't let me see her scared." Joel turned the stove off and walked over. He didn't touch me right away. "What do you need right now?" he asked. That question again. Not what's wrong. Not what can I fix. What do you need? "I don't know," I admitted. He stepped closer. "You want to talk?" I shook my head. "Sit." "Maybe." He took my hand gently and guided me to the couch. We sat down. He pulled me against him like it was automatic now. My head rested against his chest. His heartbeat was steady. Always steady. She asked me if I thought she looked weak. I murmured. "What did you say?" "That she looked strong." He was quiet for a second. "Did you mean it?" "Yes," I said immediately. He brushed his fingers slowly through my hair. "Then that's enough." I swallowed. "I don't want to lose her." "I know." The way he said it made it clear he'd seen that fear coming weeks ago. "And I don't want to lose you either," I added before I could stop myself. The words hung there. He stilled slightly, not pulling away, just absorbing it. "You won't," he said. "That's not something you can promise." He shifted so I had to look at him. "You're not losing me because things are hard," he said firmly. "You're not losing me because you're overwhelmed. You're not losing me because you don't have everything figured out." I held his gaze. "What if I fall apart?" I whispered. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to mine. "Then I'll sit on the floor with you until you're done." That was it. That was the moment. Not the first kiss. Not the hospital. Not the fight. This. The quiet certainty in his voice when he said he'd sit with me on the floor. That's when I knew. I loved him. Not because he rescued me. Not because he showed up once in a crisis. But because he stayed when staying was inconvenient. Because he didn't rush my healing. Because he didn't try to compete with my grief. Because he didn't need me to be smaller so he could feel bigger. I pulled back slightly and looked at him. "Joel." "Yeah." I hesitated, then stopped hesitating. "I love you." The words felt terrifying and solid. He didn't flinch, didn't look startled, didn't look trapped. He just studied me for a second like he always did when something mattered. "Say that again," he said softly. "I love you." His jaw flexed slightly, like he was steadying himself now. "You don't say things you don't mean," he said. "No, even when you're scared. Especially then." That did something to him. I saw it. The shift. He cupped my face in both hands. "I love you too," he said. Not rushed. Not reactive. Certain. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. He kissed me slow, grounding, deliberate. Not desperate. Not heated. Just real. Later that night, we lay in bed facing each other. The apartment was quiet. No machines. No hospital sounds. No ringing phones. Just us. "You know," I said softly, "I thought the worst part of this year was losing my job." He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." "Then I thought it was losing Bryce." He hummed lightly. "And now?" I traced my fingers lightly along his wrist. "Now I think the worst part was almost not meeting you." He gave a small, rare smile at that. "You would have been fine," he said. "Maybe," I admitted. "But I wouldn't have been this." He pulled me closer. "This what?" "Brave." His expression softened in a way I don't think anyone else gets to see. "You were brave before me," he said. "Maybe," I replied. "But you made it easier." And that's the truth. I fell in love with the man who helped me survive the worst period of my life. But I stayed in love with the man who didn't disappear once the emergency lights were gone. My mom is still fighting. I'm still rebuilding. We still argue sometimes. I still get quiet when I'm overwhelmed. But now, when I shut down, there's someone who sits beside me instead of walking away. And that changed everything.